White woman screamed, "You can't be a real doctor." He asked her to read his badge. What happens when the doctor they tried to silence ends up rewriting the rules of the hospital? They hoped he'd leave quietly, but his voice echoed louder than they ever expected. What happened next in room 6 left the entire floor speechless. The ER at Atlanta Central Hospital didn't buzz. It didn't hum. It roared, like a freight train of urgency crashing through fluorescent lights, antiseptic tang, and the soft rustle of hope clinging to IV bags. It was the kind of space where time didn't tick. It sprinted, and standing in the middle of it, towering over the chaos like a man carved from something heavier than bone, was Dr. Malik Harrison. 34 years old, 6 feet 2, skin like burnished mahogany, cheekbones that looked God-sculpted, and eyes that hadn't closed in over 24 hours. Not because he couldn't, but because lives didn't wait. Not in his unit, not on his watch. He just walked out of surgery. 2, actually. First, a man whose aorta decided to rip like an old tire on a Georgia back road. Minutes later, a woman collapsed mid-chemo. Veins turned to glass from weeks of poison they called treatment. Both were alive, both breathing because of him. And yet here he stood now, in front of the vending machine, gripping a water bottle like it owed him rent. Just give me 5 minutes, he thought. 5 whole, uninterrupted minutes of quiet. But peace for a black man in a white coat is a luxury rarely afforded, and never without penalty. That's when she stormed in. "Where's the doctor?" The voice sliced through the ER like broken glass. Everyone turned. Even the machines paused. She was white, mid-40s. Fur coat that smelled of money and entitlement. Hair disheveled in a way that cost $300 at a salon. She dragged a boy behind her, maybe 8 years old, gasping for air, his face pale and lips turning blue like the Atlanta skyline at dusk. "My son! He can't breathe. Somebody, do something." Malik was already moving. No hesitation, no grandstanding. This was his job, his oath, his lane. He stepped toward them calmly, hands raised, voice steady like warm bourbon. "I'm Dr. Harrison. Let me take a look at—" And then she recoiled. Not subtly, not politely, like she'd seen a rattlesnake wearing scrubs. "Number, stop." Her eyes squinted, suspicion thick as honey. No, I need a real doctor." Malik blinked, slowly, carefully, like a man rehearsing restraint. He'd seen this movie before, too many times. The casting never changed. White panic in the role of concerned mother. Black excellence, miscast as a threat. Even now, her eyes scanned his ID badge as if it were written in another language. He replied, voice low and unflinching, "Ma'am, I am the real doctor." He pointed to his chest where the badge gleamed under hospital lights. "Dr. Malik Harrison, MD. Cardiology," she stammered. Her eyes flicked again from his face to his badge and back, clearly trying to square the reality in front of her with the biases built into her bones. I thought you were maybe a tech or something." From the nurse's station came a sharp breath. Nurse Kayla, seasoned and unamused, rolled her eyes so hard they practically echoed. "Dr. Harrison has saved 3 lives since sunrise, but I guess you're waiting for a doctor with a different look?" The woman blushed, a blotchy crimson creeping up her neck, but didn't budge. I just don't feel comfortable." Malik exhaled, slow and surgical. "Ma'am, while you're figuring out how comfortable you are, your son is actively losing oxygen. He's in bronchospasm. 3 minutes. That's all I need to save his life." "How do you know that?" she asked, suddenly hushed, like she realized just how loud her fear had been. Malik stepped closer, voice softer now, but fierce. "Because I trained for 10 years. Because I've seen this exact reaction 100 times. And because, despite your doubts, I'm still your best shot." The air in the ER thickened. Phones came out. A teenager began filming. Kayla disappeared into the supply room. And Malik, he didn't wait for permission. He dropped to one knee, checked the boy's pupils, counted respirations, pressed fingers to a thinning wrist. His brow furrowed, but his hands never shook. This was what he was built for. "Get me a nebulizer with albuterol. Stat. On it!" Kayla's voice rang out from down the hall. Within 4 minutes, the boy was breathing. Slow, ragged, but breathing. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. Malik stood, looked directly at the woman, whose composure was unraveling faster than her expensive mascara. "There. He's stable. You may resume doubting my qualifications now." She muttered something, thank you or sorry. He couldn't tell and didn't care. It didn't matter. Her crisis was over. His, however, had just been televised. From the back of the room, someone muttered, "What a disgrace!" Malik let out a dry laugh. No joy in it. only recognition. Because for every life he saved, there would always be another stranger ready to strip him of his title with a single glance. He walked to the break room, peeled off his white coat, and dropped into the nearest chair. Exhaustion pressed on him like gravity. And then the door opened. Dr. Bates, his supervisor, stepped in, balding, nervous, clipboard in hand, the kind of man who prided himself on neutrality, even when neutrality hurt. "Malik," he began, voice like wet paper. We received a complaint from the boy's mother. She says you were aggressive." Malik sat upright. "You serious right now? Look, I'm on your side." "No, you're not," Malik snapped. "If you were, you'd be in that waiting room setting the record straight. We have protocols. Do you have a protocol for being called a fraud because of the color of your skin? Do you have a line item for what happens when patients reject life-saving care based on racial bias?" Bates looked cornered, guilty, small. "Malik, please, let's not make this bigger than—" "It is bigger than me," he said, standing now towering. "It's bigger than all of us. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time you get out of the way. No yelling, no theatrics, just truth, heavy, brutal, and overdue." He walked out of the room, not because he was finished, but because he was just getting started. And somewhere in the distance, someone's heart monitor beeped steadily. Life continued, but now so did the fight. What happened next changed everything. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. Morning didn't start with coffee, it started with betrayal. Dr. Malik Harrison opened his inbox expecting an update from the night shift. Maybe a lab result, or, God willing, a thank you note from a parent. What he got instead was a digital slap dressed in corporate politeness. Subject line, RE:"Administrative Review Notification." The body of the email was as sterile and cold as the steel trays in the OR. "Dear Dr. Harrison, you are hereby placed on temporary administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation concerning a patient complaint. We appreciate your cooperation." Just like that. No calls, no conversation, no face-to-face. Malik stared at the screen, then at his hands. These hands had held a child's life yesterday. Administered medication with precision most people couldn't manage with a calculator. And today, they were just idle, stripped of access, authority revoked, barred from doing the one thing he was born to do. He closed the laptop, not because there was nothing to say, but because if he started speaking now, there was no telling when he'd stop or what he might say. Outside, rain tapped against the window like a slow drum roll before war. That kind of rain that didn't fall on concrete, but sank straight into the soul. But Malik wasn't the type to hide from storms. He walked straight into them, and that's where the process began. See, in hospitals, they call it a review. In Black communities, we have another word: setup. First stop, legal backup. He was in Marcia Grace's office before noon. A former federal defender turned civil rights powerhouse. She didn't do small talk. She didn't do hand-holding. What she did was justice, with a voice sharp enough to slice through courtroom smog and eyes that could turn lies into confessions. She didn't stand when he entered, just nodded to the chair. "Sit, doctor. I heard. It's not the first time. Won't be the last. Question is, are you ready to fight?" Malik leaned in, voice firm, calm, but fire building in his chest. "Number, I'm ready to diagnose. And this system, it's long overdue for treatment." Marcia smirked. Then let's open the chart. First prescription, video. They watched it together. The now viral clip of a woman screaming, "You can't be a real doctor," while Malik stood steady, raising his badge like a mirror. Then the moment he saved the child's life. Then the silence, the kind that roared louder than sirens. "We'll start with the board, then press, then federal complaint. But first, commission." That word always tasted like steel. Commission. A place where decisions wore ties and truths got edited. Malik entered the hearing room. A long table, 7 suits seated like jurors in a drama they already rehearsed. Chief medical officer, HR rep, legal counsel, every face perfectly trained in the art of performative empathy. The CMO opened with a script. "Dr. Harrison, you understand why we're here today?" Malik didn't flinch. "Yeah, because I saved a child's life in the wrong color uniform." The attorney shifted in his seat. "That's an unfair accusation. We are approaching this from an objective standpoint." Malik cut him off. "Objective? Really? 12 Black doctors have resigned from this hospital in the last 3 years. 7 were investigated after complaints. Not one was substantiated, yet every single one left with the same vague stamp: personal reasons. Sound familiar?" Marcia leaned forward and tossed a stack of papers on the table. And here's correspondence between your admin team and the patient who filed the complaint. Her words verbatim, he does not represent what I expect from a physician. Still want to talk about objectivity? Silence. But silence isn't a confession. It's just strategy. Malik stepped out into the hallway. The cameras were already waiting. Microphones extended like weapons. Questions flew like darts. Is this the first time you've experienced racial bias on the job? Do you believe the healthcare system is stacked against black professionals? He didn't answer. Not because he had no words, but because he was tired of filling the same prescription. One dose of trauma, two of dignity, repeat as needed. Because when you're a black doctor, you're not just saving lives. You're proving every single day that you deserve to. That evening, his phone buzzed. Kayla, her voice trembled. Not from fear, but from rage barely held back. Malik, they want you to resign, voluntarily, to preserve hospital reputation. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then laughter. Bitter, jagged, real. So reputation matters more than respiration? They're calling the video manipulated, claiming public pressure tactics. Funny how truth becomes manipulation the minute it gets uncomfortable. Kayla was quiet. I'm with you. Whatever you decide. He hung up and stared out the window. Rain still falling. The kind of rain his mother used to say washed away lies. He remembered her words. Her hand in his on the first day of school. Her voice saying, they'll see you as a threat before you open your mouth, but you're not a threat, baby. You're the answer. He opened his laptop and wrote, my name is Dr. Malik Harrison. I saved a child's life. I've been suspended. Welcome to American medicine, where the color of your skin matters more than the oath you took. This is America. In an hour, it had 50,000 shares. By the second hour, his phone rang. Unknown number. Dr. Harrison? This is CNN. We'd like your story. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't say thank you, but rather, let's begin. 3 days into his forced leave, Dr. Malik Harrison no longer looked like a doctor. Not because he lost his dignity. No, that stayed stitched to his spine like the white coat they took from him. But today, he wasn't playing the part of a hospital employee. He came as something much more dangerous. A black man who decided he wouldn't just live inside the system, he would crack it open and expose the mold. He stood on the stone steps of Atlanta Central Hospital, the building he'd given 7 years of his life to. Not in scrubs, in a tailored navy suit, shoes polished to a mirror shine, eyes clear with purpose. The cameras were already rolling. Reporters shuffled, microphones hovered, but Malik didn't flinch. He raised both hands slightly. No anger, just control. Before you ask questions, he said, eyes boring into the nearest lens, we're gonna do something together. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Now say it out loud. Dr. period, Malik Harrison. He paused. Dr. Malik Harrison. That's the name this hospital decided wasn't believable enough. The name a patient couldn't match with my face. But she knows it now. The whole country does. Boom. That clip alone hit 3 million views before the afternoon traffic cleared downtown. Inside the hospital, the mood was a silent panic. No one was running, but eyes darted like roaches under sudden light. The boardroom smelled like burnt toast and tension. Legal counsel whispered too loudly. One exec, pacing by the coffee machine, dropped the line of the week. Why couldn't he just leave quietly? Exactly, that's what they always want. Quiet black doctors, quiet black nurses, quiet black janitors and administrators and students and interns who keep their heads down and their mouths shut until the institution decides they're no longer a fit. But Malik was not raised quiet. His mother didn't survive redlined housing and 3 jobs to raise a son who would let dignity die in silence. He was not going anywhere. Meanwhile, Marcia Grace was already moving like a chess master in a crowded room. Civil Rights Commission, Human Rights Committee, local media, then national. Everything unfolding like dominoes laid out by generations before her. That's how they landed at the public hearing. Ms. Whitmore showed up dressed for the occasion, mascara running in carefully designed streaks, lawyer in tow, voice trembling with just enough drama to sound remorseful, but not enough to be accountable. I was under stress, she said. I didn't mean to question his legitimacy. It wasn't about race. It was a misunderstanding. I regret how it escalated. Malik didn't roll his eyes, didn't laugh, didn't yell. He leaned back, folded his arms, and said the line that cracked the room. Isn't it funny? Nobody ever means to be racist. And yet somehow racism always ends up with results. Silence. Because what could they say? No one clapped. but nobody argued either. But the real climax didn't happen in the commission's conference room. It didn't air on CNN. It didn't even trend on Twitter. It happened back inside the hospital, the same building where he'd spent sleepless nights and skipped meals, running from code blue to code red, where his badge used to open every door until someone decided it shouldn't. The board invited him, well, summoned him. A meeting to discuss a resolution, translation, damage control with a side of appeasement. Malik walked into that boardroom with a folder in one hand and fire in the other. The table was full, 7 administrators, each one paler than a lab coat and twice as stiff. They didn't smile. They didn't blink. They waited. He didn't waste time. You didn't know how to handle it, right? He began. Because in your world, if a black doctor's successful, he's an inspiration. If he pushes back, he's a problem. But if he does both, what then? They blinked. Some looked down, but Malik was just warming up. He pulled the numbers. Exit data on every black physician who left in the last 5 years. Nearly all after conflicts. Not one formal finding, but all gone. A pattern that needed no commentary. You built a workplace that congratulates diversity in brochures, but punishes it in break rooms. And when you saw me stand firm instead of bowing out, you got scared. But I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you, this can change, but not unless you're willing to pull the rod out by the roots. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The walls themselves leaned in to listen. I'm not here for revenge, he said. I'm here to build, but you can't build anything new on soil this contaminated. So here's the choice. Either fix it with me, or I'll fix it without you. No applause, but no rebuttal either. Just a long, empty pause that said everything. After the meeting, the chief medical officer approached him in the hallway, sweating like he just ran a mile. Malik, that was powerful. I wanted to talk to you about coming back, not to the floor, to something bigger. Malik raised an eyebrow. Go on. We're thinking about creating a new role, ethics and equity office. And you'd lead it. You'd build it. Your terms. Malik looked him over the way a surgeon examines an x-ray. Not hostile, just clinical. One condition. Sure, name it. I pick the team. And anyone who's been climbing by, stepping on fear, they go first, he returned. But not just to a hospital badge, to a new wing, a new mission, a new seat at the table, one that didn't require him to prove he belonged, but let him decide who else did. He built something that didn't just treat illness. It treated injustice, an internal watchdog group, bias training that actually worked, safe reporting channels, real accountability, no more whispers in locker rooms, no more fake fit reviews, and never again would a black doctor feel like they had to shrink to be safe. A week into his new role, he spotted her, Ms. Whitmore clutching her son's hand, walking slowly toward the outpatient wing. Her eyes met his and stopped. She froze. He didn't. Room 3, he said calmly. Ultrasound's prepped. And yes, Miss Whitmore, I'm still a real doctor. Still your best option. She said nothing, just walked inside. And as the door closed, one of the nurses nearby whispered under her breath, well, I'll be damned. That was smooth. This was the moment everything shifted. But there's still more, because the story doesn't end with one win. It begins with what happens after the fight. Stay tuned. 2 weeks had passed. 2 long, heavy weeks in which Atlanta Central Hospital transformed from a neutral bastion of medicine, so whitewashed it could double as a sterile showroom, into a space where every person glanced over their shoulder more than once. Because Dr. Malik Harrison, black and unrelenting, had become the head of the new Ethics and Equity Department. This department now held the power to decide who gets an intern, who receives a warning, and who receives a polite farewell letter disguised as a fond remembrance. He carried that power not to lord it over others, but to reshape a system built on silence and selective visibility, issuing new policies in crisp printed folders, forcing accountability into each hallway. Walking down the corridor one morning, Malik carried a thick presentation folder filled with anti-discrimination guidelines, clear, actionable measures to ensure no one ever again feels compelled to shrink, mute, or step out of sight in the name of supposed professionalism. Some colleagues nodded at him with the warmth of hesitant respect, while others barely acknowledged his presence, voices quieter, tempers sharper, a nurse whispering in the break room that the system doesn't like it when the person it ignored suddenly takes the wheel. That sentiment hung in the air like an accusation aimed at their collective conscience. And yet Malik didn't smile because of power. He smiled when he saw a new intern emerge into the light, a dark-skinned young woman with long dreadlocks stepping confidently through the hall, never lowering her eyes because she knew there was someone in the building, someone who had walked the same path, who would have her back. On his third Monday post-appointment, there came a knock at his office door that felt intentional, familiar, even fateful. Malik opened it to find Nurse Kayla standing straight as always, voice piercing like an X-ray. She said only, "We have a new patient, room 6. You'll be surprised by the name." He followed her down the hallway, footsteps echoing in the hush of operations slowed by tension. When they reached room 6 and he opened the door, he paused. Yes, he genuinely paused. There she was again, Mrs. Whitmore, lying pale on the hospital bed, face drained, eyes anxious. She looked fragile, human, stripped of pretense. Kayla announced quietly, "She has arrhythmia, significant irregular heartbeat, and you know who's now in charge of cardiology reviews here?" Malik did know, and he closed the door behind him. He observed her, not with judgment, but with professional intention. No arrogance, no lingering resentment, just clinical presence. She raised her eyes. No arrogance, no confidence, only fatigue, fear, plain human tremor in her chest. "Dr. Harrison," she began, voice trembling, "I understand if you don't want to." He gently interrupted her, voice low but direct. "Mrs. Whitmore, you are the patient. I am the doctor. Let's leave everything outside this door. All that matters now is your heart, not your story." He checked her pulse, listened to the rhythm of her chest with patient precision, ordered the necessary tests, and drafted a plan for treatment based on his findings. And when she almost whispered, "Thank you for doing this," he lifted his hand calmly. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise that next time you see a doctor who doesn't look the way you expected, you'll take a moment to read the badge. Or better yet, listen to a heartbeat. Not your own, but his." She nodded slowly, relief washing across her face. And for the first time, she saw him not as an interloper, but as indispensable. 1 month later, Malik found a letter slipped onto his desk. No envelope, just a neatly folded sheet of paper written in graceful, mature handwriting. "Dr. Harrison, I have thought deeply about our first interaction. In that instant, I saw a stranger. Yet you saved my son. Later, you saved me. Now I understand. You were never the stranger. It was my fear that blinded me. Thank you, S. Whitmore." He placed the note in his personal drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that true change unfolds not with loud declarations, but through quiet acknowledgments. A series of small, intimate victories that add up over time. A week after that, he was invited to deliver a keynote address at the annual convention of the American Medical Association. Standing on that stage, he wasn't a viral headline or a social media sensation. He was a principle in action, a standard raised. Here he spoke with slow, deliberate cadence, each sentence laden with intent, as though the audience's skin should absorb every word like an injection of possibility. "I entered medicine believing it to be a place where only health mattered," he said, and the crowd leaned in as though feeling the weight of his words. "But I quickly realized, health is only as equitable as the face behind the stethoscope, and as respected as the name on the badge. I don't want to be a hero. I want Black physicians to be the norm, Black patients to never die because they weren't believed. Where when someone says, 'You can't be a real doctor,' we all rise in unison and say, 'Then learn to read.'" The auditorium rose, not as applause for one man, but as affirmation of possibility for many. And in the collective hush afterward, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but charged with understanding, Malik recognized the deeper victory, not in the cheers, but in the stillness of recognition. That night, returning home through the dusky Atlanta streets, Malik passed by that same vending machine where it all began. He paused, pushed the button, grabbed a bottle of water, twisted the cap, took a sip, and allowed himself a quiet smile, not the kind born from triumph, but from resolution, awareness, and an opening path forward. Because this chapter wasn't about winning a fight, it was about opening doors and teaching thousands of badges to speak for themselves. Ahead lay more work, more policies, more trainings, more quiet confrontations with assumptions built into daily routines. But Malik understood that the real change occurs when someone who once felt invisible finally stands where they belong and starts making sure no one else is forced back into the shadows. The war for equity isn't over, but this battle, it's won, and better still, it's only just beginning.